Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I recently replaced the struts on my E39 and was absolutely amazed at the difference that it made. So I made this video here on how to do it. Step 1 is remove the front wheel, and then I'm going to move the camera inside the wheel well so you can see the bolts to remove in there. Now there's not a whole lot of bolts to remove for this project. You just need to disconnect the sway bar links and take out the pinch bolt for the shock down here, and then there's the 3 bolts on top that hold the strut in, and it comes out of there. Now I had to develop a technique that I'll show you here shortly. The sway bar link is held on by, I think it was a 16 or millimeter socket and a 17 millimeter wrench, and then the shock is held in by a 18 millimeter bolt and nut, I believe. I might be wrong on those sizes because I did this a couple weeks ago and I've been busy and haven't been able to make a video. But there's not a whole lot of tools involved, and if you have a socket set and some wrenches in metric sizes, you should be able to get this apart. So with the sway bar link out and the shock bolt or strut pinch bolt out, got out some lube, which I learned later wasn't really necessary. This actually came apart easier than I expected. But I got my pry bar in behind there in the pinch point, just pried it a little bit and it slid right out. I mean, the strut body was loose in the steering knuckle there. So then I went up top and we got these 3 nuts up here for the strut tower that comes through into the under hood area, and you just basically take all 3 of those nuts off, and that's what holds your whole strut in there, those 3 nuts and the pinch bolt on the bottom. So get those 3 off of there, get the impact out, speed things along here, and then we'll show you the technique to remove the strut. I actually struggled for a little while to try and get the shock out of here, and there I showed it to you really quick, but basically just put your foot on the brake rotor and stand on it to pry it down far enough to get the top of the strut out of the fender. Now here's another look from the other side. Stand on it, push down, and pull the strut out of there. This is not a really easy task. I actually scratched one of my fenders a bit. Probably best to put some duct tape over the fender or something to protect it, and then I don't know, maybe you're heavier or stronger than I am and can get that done without scratching yours, but that's what I did. Next up, I got the strut on the floor. We got to get the spring off of it. So I got this spring compressor tool on Amazon, and to be honest, I'm not going to promote it or tell you guys to buy it even, because it worked good enough. It didn't really I struggle with that quite a bit as well, to get it in the right position and get the spring compressed far enough to actually remove the spring from the shock. Another thing I learned while doing this is you might want to loosen up the top nut in the center of that strut tower while it's still in the car. The shaft inside can spin, and you don't want to take it all the way off and have the thing go shooting apart on you, but you can loosen it up while it's in the car. So here I'm getting the spring compressor lined up. They tell you not to use an impact on it, but I use an impact on everything. You've watched my videos before. You just got to know what you're doing with it. And got my spring compressed, getting my center nut off here. That actually is onto the top of the shock rod itself. And then we can remove the spring from the shock. We'll get that top bearing off and the upper spring retainer out of the way. Okay, so there's the top bearing, the nut off. There's just a washer on it. A lot of people like to replace these when they do the strut job. I didn't. They seemed okay, and well, I just did the struts. So there's the upper spring retainer. It's got like a rubber pad that the spring sits on, and I can pull the strut out of there. This one was missing the bump stop, and that boot was missing part of it. And there's another rubber pad on the bottom. So there we have it. You can see this one had a little damping left in it, but not great. So here I got my new one. It comes with a little wire on it to hold it compressed in the box. Pulled that off, and this one actually comes out on its own. It's got some nitrogen charge left in it, unlike the old one. And I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the spring retainer and put that back on the rubber pad, and then I'll get out the new bump stop and rubber boot. They sell that separately and get you coming and going, but I put them on there. Good idea to protect it. Maybe it'll last a little while. So you got to pull the bump stop out of there and then put it into the boot like that, and then just kind of slips over the top of the shock, and the bump stop fits kind of tight on the shaft and goes at the top. So put that on there, and then we can put our strut back into the spring. So I got my rubber pad in there. I got my spring over the shock. There's another rubber pad for the top spring retainer. Got that fitted. You got to make sure your spring's located in the right spot. Good idea to look at it before you take it apart, and make sure your spring ends go where they need to go. And you can see it on the rubber, the marks from the old one. This is the point where I decided that since I have this bearing and since a lot of people replace it, I should probably put some fresh grease in there. So I had it fitted on there, and then I pulled it back off and got the tub of grease out, packed it as best I could. We got the bearing packed, we got the washer back on there, and we just got to stick that on top of the shock shaft and thread our nut back on there. And then once we get that nut on there and tighten it down, we can go ahead and remove the scary spring compressor. And once again, the tool manufacturer said to not use an impact, so here I show you that I used an impact. Might have got scared for a minute and used my ratchet, but I was kind of sick of messing around at this point, and I threw caution to the wind, put a little lube on the tool, and got out the impact again. This would have been a whole lot of wrenching. As you can see, I'm not super excited about this tool. I had to have it in just the right spot. Had to tighten it almost all the way down. And even still, it was just not a pleasure to use in any way. I cut out a lot of this and I sped up some of it, and yeah, it was a lot of messing around. But hey, you know what? If you're on a budget, like I kind of was at the time, I got the KYB shocks. They're good value for the money. And I got this tool for, it wasn't very much money on Amazon. I think it was like 20 bucks or something. So, I mean, it got the job done. There's probably much nicer ones, but if you're not doing it every day, this gets you by. That, or a lot of your local stores would borrow you one, but I'm all about having tools in the toolbox, so I wanted to buy something. So now we're back under the car. Just wiped down where the strut goes in a little bit. Got some of the rocks and heavy dirt out of there. And then you go ahead and put the strut in. If you look at it, the strut has like a locator on it, so there's a left and a right. And that locator just drops down into the pinch area to locate the strut. That's different than this one that came on it. The stock one had a little bit different setup for locating it, but I guess, you know, it works. So here's that technique. You see the DC skate shoe pushing down on the brake rotor as I work the shock into the fender area, and voila, she's ready to bolt back up in. So then I got it in the fender, use my foot to get it up into place, and then you got to kind of finagle it and tighten your nuts up under the fender. At this point it's getting kind of late, and on both sides I forgot to move the camera and get me tightening that down. So just be sure you tighten those top nuts. You can't really mess it up. Well, I guess you could, but don't forget to tighten them down. So now we just put this pinch bolt in. I ended up putting a jack under it after I got the wheel on and just going under there and tightening it down to make sure I was all the way up against the stop on the strut. But you can put a jack under that steering knuckle as well, and just put some tension on it before you tighten down the pinch bolt, and then you're sure it's, you know, all the way in there. So I didn't want to have a gap there that, you know, slides down over time or something. You can throw your alignment off and whatever else. So not a bad idea to just place a jack under there before you tighten that nut. Then simply hook up the sway bar link. I guess a lot of people like to replace those as well. My X5, it made a big difference when I replaced those because they were noisy. But on this car, you know, there's not a lot of rust on this car, and things seem to be in pretty decent shape. So unless it's broken, I'm not going to fix it. Now these struts were actually leaking oil, is why I went in to replace them. I guess I wasn't unhappy with the handling of it. It just they were leaking, and it made a big difference. So probably do the rear ones here soon. So we get those the sway bar nut tightened down, the pinch bolt and nut tightened down, 3 nuts on top, tighten down, and put your wheel back on. And after you take the car down off the jacks, don't forget to torque your wheel down. And there we have it. There's the strut job. I don't need you to show you the other side because it's all the same. And stay tuned to the channel here. There's always projects to do on the old E39 530i. Thanks for watching.